start. So welcome to everyone, and thanks for taking the time to come here today, especially to Jackie and Rebecca. It's been a great opportunity for working with them. It's a great partnership. They are donating their time to Landcare Victoria, and we are very lucky. I've had a look at the presentation, and I can guarantee it's going to be a great evening. A lot to go through, but it's going to be really good content. I'd like to start today by acknowledging the country. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we work today, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this webinar, in particular the Gunai Kunai people that are the traditional custodians of the lands on which I work today. And I acknowledge all the lands on which you are today. Can I get the next slide, Jackie? So today, I should have added another Landcare Victoria team member there. We also have, so I'm Anna Pimenta, I'm the Landcare Development Coordinator. Some of you know me. I do a lot of grant auspicing arrangements with our members, insurance, and other things with Landcare Victoria. But we also have our communications officer, Sarah Vella, here today, and she'll be answering some of your questions if they pop up. And our key presenters today are from the Jackie Street and Rebecca Gridley from the Climate Media Centre. As I said before, Jackie is actually in Hobart and Rebecca is in Canberra, is that right? Yeah, and yes, next slide, Jackie. Before we start, I also would like to acknowledge our funding partner, so the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action, for supporting us in this project. This is a project that is called Advancing Landcare. We're doing a series of webinars, so there's more to come. This, for example, is a part one of a series of 2 webinars in media, and we'll have a few more that I'll talk to you at the end of tonight. And a little bit of housekeeping. So potentially there'll be a few of you participating tonight. So I'm just going to ask that you do not unmute yourself, that you use the chat option. If you don't know where that is, it's at the bottom of your screen. And you can use it to write any of the questions throughout the webinar. We'll likely get to them at the end, but Jackie and Rebecca might be able to answer some of them in the chat. And that's it from me. I'll pass it on to Jackie and Rebecca to continue today and let them introduce themselves. And thanks so much for everyone for being here tonight.
Thanks, Anna. Hi, everyone. Hopefully we've got a lot to get through, so I'll try to get through it at a pace, but not too rushy, hopefully. What we're looking at today is media. So traditional media, what we call legacy media, online media, TV, radio, and print, not social media. We are embarking on a social media training project, but we don't have that tonight. So we're going to look at how we talk about climate change, a bit about the media, what journalists want, why are they like this, key messages, how to prepare for interviews, and a few tips along the way. Just to, by way of introduction, I used to work for ABC for about 15 years. I've worked in different parts of the country, in the Sunshine Coast, Melbourne, on the News Breakfast program. Some of you might have seen, used to have Virginia and Michael on it when I worked on it. And I've also worked a fair bit in Tassie and Hobart and Launceston, a lot of regional work. Beck, do you want to talk a little bit about your background? Beck's done some amazing stuff at in the hoity-toity bubbles of Canberra.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Beck Redley. So I worked with News Corp and Australian Associated Press as a journalist, bit all over the place. So in Sydney, Perth, and probably most of the time at the Press Gallery in Canberra. Most of that was spent covering the Angus Taylor years as Energy Minister. So I'm still recovering a little bit from that, and have been with the Climate Media Centre team since mid-2021. And on the side, I'm actually coordinating a microforest project and have done a bit of work with our local Queanbeyan and Landcare group, and they're fantastic. So a huge fan of all of the work that you do and all the plantings that you managed to get done. It's very impressive.
Yes, we are big fans. A bit about who we work for. We are a project of the Climate Council, but our job is not to promote the Climate Council. We're a PR agency. We work for the climate. We work for people that want to talk about the climate. We have on our books former coal miners, athletes, energy analysts, a lot of farmers. I work mostly with farmers and veterinarians in my sphere. We try really to deliver media training that is tailored to different groups. We also provide messaging to the overall climate movement. And we also sometimes, when they listen to us, we advise the media on stuff as well. Just to bring it back to what you are hoping to get out of this session, if you just want to take a moment to think about what you're looking for. These are some of the things that people said they were hoping to get out of the session. Things about feeling more confident in developing a comms plan. That probably is going to be a bit more in the next session, but we'll touch a bit on that. Insights into the media, definitely. Strategies about how to share a positive climate message. We can definitely talk about that. How to assist Landcare volunteers with media, and this one, understand the language of effective communication on topics of relevance, especially around climate change. And I'm so glad someone said that, because that's exactly what I'm going to start with. This is our narrative model. This is how we think we can change things, right? So we start with a consistent message, and we'll talk about messages a bit later, delivered by trusted voices. And that is you guys, to be honest. People from Landcare, farmers, veterinarians. Beck works with people in the Pacific. We work, anybody that is not a politician, basically, is considered a trusted voice. And we need to deliver these messages loudly, and we repeat them over and over. So when we're talking climate change, the people that we work with, we encourage them to have their messages ready and to inject them into every single answer over and over again. And when you feel like you're sounding like a broken record, that's when things are actually starting to kick in. We have a big challenge at the moment. Previously, our challenge was that under a previous government, there was no action on climate change. There was no mention of climate change. It was a non-event. Now we have a big challenge in the sense of that we have a government that says they want to do stuff, but it's more about moving that conversation on from is climate change real to what are we doing about it? And that's a much more nuanced conversation. So we need to, our main drivers are showing that climate change is caused by burning coal, oil and gas, and that is driving increasingly unpredictable and extreme weather events. That climate action must accelerate. At the moment, we are still, our emissions globally are still going up, right? Like, we haven't got there yet. I know we've got a lot of solutions happening, but we're not there yet. Farmers and regional Australians understand and want solutions. That's a big part of my work, is trying to remind people that a lot of people in regional places are very switched onto this issue, and really people like yourselves already out there doing stuff. We just need to remind the community that that's happening. So how do we do that? We look into our principles of communication. So before you want to do any media, these are the questions I'd really like you to ask. I cannot tell you the number of times groups have come to us, and groups that do a lot of media, and they'll say, oh, we want to do media on this thing. And we always ask, well, why? Why do you want to do media? Is this really something that you want to put out in the media, or is this a letter to your MP saying, thanks very much for the meeting? Is this something that you think the general community would like to know, should know? The next really important thing is to ask, well, who's your audience? And so many people forget this question. It's really critical. Like, who are you trying to reach with any media piece? You have to think about that, because that depends then on who you pitch to, what media outlets you go for. If you're trying to reach politicians, like Georgia Beattie there, farmer from Farmers to Climate Action, if you're trying to reach politicians, you will go for what we call decision maker press. So you will go for ABC, Radio National, The Australian. Unfortunately, that is what a lot of politicians read. Sky News, the AFR, jump in, Beck, if you can think of any more. And we really need to keep our message simple and think, what do we want people to know? And then consider framing. I'll get onto framing in a minute, but framing is how are you going to sell that story? How is what you're doing relevant? We talk about keeping our language really simple. Whenever you're doing media of any kind, you need to stick to things that a 12-year-old would understand. Our colleague Emily, who worked for the Daily Telegraph, said the age of readers they would aim for was actually 9 years old. So when we're trying to do away with any kind of jargon, complicated terms, we talk about what's happening. This is where you guys in Landcare are really well placed. Talk about your community, solutions that you're seeing, things that are actually happening on the ground using active and specific language. This is about framing. So over here on the right, you can see 3 different headlines, 3 different takes on the power outage. For Steve Price, it was a glimpse of a sort of a terrible future in a climate change obsessed state. Tim Buckley said it was a problem that had occurred because of decades of inaction. And another analyst, Roger Dargville's like, well, actually, it wasn't that bad. It's the same event. It's the same news story. They've just put different frames around it. And the frame, if you've got a beautiful wood frame, you've got a gold frame, you've got a modern frame, that affects how you see the picture, how you see the story, yeah? The kind of language we use, the kind of ways that we talk about things affect a frame. Like you can talk about solar panel installation. You can talk about it from a greenhouse gas emissions frame, or you could talk about it from a energy bill saving frame. That's a cost of living frame, we would say. And just down the bottom there, some of you might be surprised, anybody that's into climate and environment, we try not to use the words climate crisis unless we're talking to The Guardian. Our spokespeople that we use, we're often trying to reach audiences that will switch off to words like climate crisis. Climate crisis, climate emergency is very real and very present, but it's also terminology that people might read or hear and they'll just go, I can't. And we've all felt that. I think anybody who's been engaged in environment issues will have felt from time to time, you think, oh my God, this is so big. And that's normal. That's very human. So when we're trying to reach different audiences, we're using the word climate change, or we're talking about solutions rather than getting too bogged down in the crisis. So yeah, just when you're thinking about preparing to do media, you really got to think about why, who you want to talk to, and how you're going to say it. All right, Beck, over to you. Beck's going to talk about a bit about understanding the media.
Thanks, Jack. And for those of you who are wanting to think about comms plans, this stuff is always relevant as well, not just for interview prep, but how the media works and how you can work with it. So in terms of media work, it's best to think about it as a deal, a bit of a transaction. So what do you want from it? You want to raise awareness of an issue, something that you're working on, encourage people to take action and promote your organization in a positive light. Whereas on the flip side, the media is really looking for a newsworthy story that their audience will find relevant and have good punchy quotes and some good visuals as well if they need it. We have times where, depending on the deadline, if a journalist needs to get a story done, they will go straight to spokes and bypass the media team, which is a bit sneaky, but they'll go straight to the spokes because they just need to get good talent right away. And they know that there are some people that they can just rely on to provide good insights, good quotes, and they just need to get the story done, particularly for like Friday afternoon drops when they've got those deadlines and they need to get a story out there. So on the next slide. Thank you. So basically what this means, it's always good to really stop and think about what you want to get from an interview and doing some kind of media work. As Jack mentioned before, there's all sorts of different kinds of media as well. We provide insights often and here for that kind of support on what kind of questions or what kind of stories particular outlets or journalists might be known for. And there are sometimes when it might be somewhere where you just go, no, thank you. I'm not going to do that story, do that interview, because you might not get what you want from it. So you can choose not to engage in the first place, which just doesn't happen too often, but I'm sure you're well aware of how some of the talkback radio hosts are and just want to get like a really divisive headline. So might not be the best bet. There was an example, I think a couple of years ago now, but when one of the Climate Council main spokespeople did an interview on 2GB, I think it was, around petrol prices and EVs. And great interview. She was very, very sharp, great advocacy work. And he asked one question around, what kind of car do you drive? And she said, I drive a petrol car, given it's, not affordable to get an electric car at the moment because of government policies. And that was just the story that they went with, ignored everything else that she said and just focused on the fact that she drove a petrol car. So yeah, I think they're on a bit of a blacklist for us at the moment. In terms of what makes news and what you should think about if you're doing something that you want to promote to the media, there's 8 news values, as I'm sure you would have seen. Taylor Swift was in the country recently. She's of the kind of star level power where you probably didn't even seek out the news. It probably found you. It managed to make its way to your news feeds, to the local media, to your social media feeds, I'm sure. I definitely know a lot of stuff about her and her relationship that I haven't sought out, but she's so newsworthy that it'll find you. So things that we think about are impact of the story, the timeliness, currency in terms of like what is being talked about and what is current, proximity. So if you're doing some local work, then local media will be quite interested in it, whereas state-based media or national media might not be as much. Prominent celebrity, as we can see here from Taylor Swift. If you have, a local celebrity or a gardening celebrity, like someone like Costa involved, then that adds the news value, increases it. Novelty factor is a huge thing. Back in the day of the end of the news bulletin with the funny little animal story. I think one I saw in a movie once was like squirrels on roller skates, that kind of silly novelty thing. Human interest as well is always a big factor. We're really into human-based personal stories. They do quite well on more niche publications as well, like parenting outlets and things like that have a lot of human interest stories. But on the flip side as well, conflict, a lot of political coverage in particular is very conflict-based, which is not the greatest, particularly in a really politicized area like climate and energy, when we want to just be promoting positive action and positive stories, make it more of a feel-good thing where there is hope and not always be focused on the conflict that's there. So in terms of doing media, there's different ways to do it. So we do a lot of either proactive and what we call reactive news. So the proactive in terms of talking about communications plans is when you're doing something that will create news. So that's when you're launching a report or just really launching a campaign or anything where you're creating the media moment. And it gives you more planning time, of course, and you can really pick a date that works for you and will work with what the news cycle is focusing on. And you can be a bit more agile as well and have more planning time. Whereas the reactive is where, for instance, the government announces something or you have the federal budget and you're reacting to it. So it's a pretty busy space in that regard. So you're kind of fighting other like organisations to get in there and to get into the news story. So being quick is really key, and having, I guess, kind of pre-planned answers or messages on particular topics is where that is really helpful. So if it's like the government has announced something on this particular issue, hey, we can just go to everything we've prepared before and tweak it to fit what it is, but the core of it is there. Like there have been times where, you're writing a story based on an announcement, you get the influx of the key groups and then like days later, someone might put out their reactive media release. And it's just not going to be used because it's just too late to be doing the story. Journalists move on pretty quickly. And speaking of journalists, they're always under the pump. It's a very, very busy industry, but even more now, they are expected to do everything with way less resources. They are expected to do video. I know with the ABC journos are absolute powerhouses. They're filing for online, for radio, TV, all of it, very tight deadlines, super talented, but they are under the pump. So that's the kind of information that we can use to be good talent and to be someone that is viewed as helpful for what they are after with their story. So being responsive and available is so key. We've all got stories of getting a media release, fantastic story, great angle, great response. Try and call the talent, not there, not picking up the phone or not available for interviews. Don't launch something if you're not going to be available on the day. Work around your schedules to make sure you're available. Make sure the story is accurate as well. They don't want to be getting in trouble later on to find out that something is inaccurate. And it's always fun as well to just let them know if there has been a mistake there. And think about the angles and how you're framing it as well, because particularly with climate stories, it's improved a bit now, but there were times where we were really needing to insert climate into the story. So you don't necessarily have to pitch it as such, but when you're doing interviews and answering questions, that's your chance to get those framing messages in there and to bring it up. So the extreme weather events, if it's not being talked about, that's what you can do. And that's power that you have with doing interviews. I always found it really helpful as well if someone said, oh, you should also speak to so-and-so, they're really great on this issue, and kind of help journalists get extra insights for their stories. It's always, yeah, super helpful, particularly if it's in an area that they might not have contacts in. And yeah, keeping releases short, sharp and punchy. There's a huge difference between the readability of getting something that's just 1 page or 1 or 2 pages. You'd be surprised at getting. People do send out releases that are like 3-4 pages long and you just get lost in the words. Better to hook a journalist in and get them to contact you to find out more, or divert them to a website to find out more, than just sending out all of the information in something that's a bit tricky to read. So we're going to talk a bit now about the types of media interviews and things that you can consider for the different types of them. That's Shadi, our colleague Emily's dog there. So in print and online, this will probably be the most kind of interviews that happen, and they'll be over the phone. Journalists will often record them and they will check with you beforehand, or they should at least, but sometimes you can hear them bashing away on a keyboard frantically to take all of the notes. They might feel more relaxed. Journalists are pretty friendly people, but that isn't a message to then let your guard down. Still remember that it is an interview, and that don't say anything that you don't want printed or wouldn't want quoted to you. And if you're meeting for someone over a chat, be very clear if you're giving them information on background and don't want it to be on the record, because the ears are always just ready for a story. If you say anything that's really exciting, they'll pick it up and want to use it in a story. And things that we can't control are what features in the story from what you've said. Even if you've had a great conversation and you think, hey, that was a really brilliant interview, I'm going to get an awesome mention. It can just be a couple of lines. Can't control that. It doesn't mean anything about the quality of the interview either. It's just how the editing process works when they're piecing together all the different voices in the story. And so for radio, mostly over the phone. I think some outlets are doing Zoom audio as well, but it's definitely case by case, but mainly over the phone. No speakerphone, super important. Not having any background noise is so key, because audio quality is just so important. So make sure that you find somewhere that you know will be quiet. Don't do it if you think there might be, like my dog always starts barking when I need quiet. So I kind of go into a room if I need to. There's different kinds of radio interviews. So you might have heard of a news grab, the hourly bulletins, and you hear a little catchy snippet from an interview. They're often pre-recorded. The journalist will ask you a couple of questions and then they'll take a really punchy bit from what you've said. And then you've also got program interviews. So that might be live, might be a pre-record, but that's a longer piece where they're asking questions and it's more of that conversation style radio interview. They often also will clip the best points from the program interview, and you'll hear them later on through the day in the news grabs. And I think mentally, in terms of preparation, it's always good to think about it being live to air, just so you're being quite careful and mindful of how you're answering questions, and not kind of continuing on, pardon me. And painting a picture in a listener's mind is really important, just to make people feel as though they're there and they can see what you're talking about, particularly in terms of climate impacts and solutions with plantings, and talking about the greenery and, the benefits from extra shade and plants. I think it's a really great topic to be able to speak very visually. And TV. So this is our former colleague Kate there on the Great Barrier Reef. So you want to be keeping your answers quite brief and self-contained. So have it like a really nice little package when you're speaking. Around 30 seconds is always really great length of time for an answer. Think of pictures as well. if you're putting a pitch forward to a journalist, you want to be thinking about what they could be shooting and what kind of visuals are there. Appearances do matter. So for here in particular, what they're wearing, their like sort of branded uniforms, they're being out on the water, really fits in with what they're talking about. If they were wearing like formal office wear, it would look really weird. When we talk about appearances mattering, it's not being the most shiny, glossy person, but it's about looking authentic. You know, we've got farmers speaking. You don't want them to be doing the interview in the middle of their farm wearing a suit and tie either. Like looking authentic and just being true to who you are is so important with TV. You want to do some hand gestures as well. So nothing too over the top, so it's really distracting, but just so you're illustrating what you're saying. Keeping it around waist level is always good. Find that even with photos, people are often like, what do I do with my hands? If you're a bit unsure, you probably can't see, but a photographer, friend of mine said that he always recommends doing this if you're not sure, just kind of keeping them loosely together, and then it'll let you do this as you want, but then just having a little bit of a safe home for them so you're not awkwardly just suddenly very aware of the fact that you have hands, which always seems to happen. And the journalist will always give you guidance on where to look. So it's often to the reporter offside from the camera. So it's more natural to have a conversation. It always feels a bit weird. You probably don't see it much on TV because they're always talking to the journalist. But if people are speaking directly to the TV camera, it's always a bit like, oh, feels like a bit too direct, a bit too personal. So it's always off. That can be a bit different if you're doing it over Zoom. But again, the journalist will give you very clear directions. And there's always the fact that you can take two as well if it's not live. So if you start fumbling an answer, just say, oh, sorry, can we please do that again? Some politicians do it even if it is live because they know it'll be grabbed later on and they just want to get like the best sentence that they can out there. So a bit of a summary. If you're thinking about media, it's a transaction. We have to think about it as a two-way deal and be really clear about what you want to get from it. In terms of newsworthiness, there needs to be some kind of strong news angle for it to be picked up and for a journalist to be interested. Otherwise, it's just like another thing that's happening that they can't report on. Reactive and proactive calls for very different kinds of tactics. And if it's the kind of thing that you need support on as well, we are a phone call away to provide some advice. Journalists are busy, so it's being mindful of that and how to work best with them is great so that they can get the best story happening quickly. And in terms of doing different interviews for different types of media, there's slight differences in what they're looking for and what they need. So just being mindful of that and how to be the best kind of talent for each type of media. I'll hand back to Jack on some key messages.
Thank you. All right. So let's say you've done this amazing press release. You've got calls coming in. You've got to do some interviews. How do you get ready for those interviews? So the first thing you got to do is figure out, what are you going to say? And what are you going to say? You're going to have 3 key messages. The key message is not exactly what you say. It's a kernel of truth to keep in your mind while the interview is happening. It's going to steer you back. If you ever get off track in an interview, you need to come back to your key message. If a journalist asks you, oh, just tell me about this, or oh, tell me more, I don't know, this is where you can shine if you have key messages. You don't want any more than 3. 1 to 3. Write them down before the interview. Even the best interviewees should be spending at least 10 minutes, 20 minutes before an interview, writing down your 3 key messages, your 3 things, or maybe you draw them. Whatever's going to work for you to keep them in your mind. Each point should be simple and straightforward. So it should be 1 sentence. Another way of thinking about it is, what do you want people to feel, think, take away from watching you on TV, from hearing you on Country Hour, from reading you in the paper? And then you've got to find different ways of getting those key messages across throughout the interview. So as an example, these are our key messages which we put out last year for the movement based on some research that we'd done. The research was telling us that people don't understand when we say we need to act on climate change, we need to reduce our use of fossil fuels. People don't understand what that means. They don't understand how it applies to them. You guys at Landcare have an amazing advantage here because you can say exactly a solution that will work and is happening in your local area that people can get involved in that will help with climate change often. But a lot of people, when they hear it, they don't understand. So our research showed us that talking about endangering our way of life, about our kids' future, those are things that resonate. So these were our key messages. Worsening extreme weather is endangering our Australian way of life. So that's something to keep in your mind. You're going to talk about it somehow in the interview. When it comes to acting on climate change, every delay pushes us further out of balance with nature. So an idea about being out of whack with nature really resonates, rather than an idea about climate pollution really resonates. People don't really understand fossil fuels, that term, but being out of whack with nature, like it makes sense. And that is obviously very key in Landcare, right? So every step we take that cuts pollution helps secure our future. Another thing that our research groups found that is that even people who are really, really into climate action are starting to feel a bit disheartened, are losing hope because you're seeing these horrible news stories about Antarctica melting and whatnot. But we need to remind everyone, every little bit counts. Every tree counts. Every riparian repair counts. Everything that little thing that we can do is going to make a difference, and not to give up hope. Another example of some key messages is this is renewable energy. So this is what I usually talk about with farmers. You will see these are pretty simple. Renewables can reduce farm energy bills. Renewables can make farms more resilient and provide income even during drought. And renewables can bring opportunities for regional businesses. I used to have renewables can create jobs, but I've since heard from some regional communities they don't like that term creating jobs because that means that, the people that work for them in their road sealing operation are going to move off or something. So we've got to be really careful, right? Different audiences, different messages. If I was talking to Melbourne audience, I'd probably put jobs back in there because that might resonate more with them. These are the key messages that we're going to talk about with Claire when Claire joins for Landcare. There's 3 there. The bold ones are very simple. We have a plan. Facilitators and coordinators are key. And we need long-term and higher funding. So that's those 3 ideas that Landcare is really trying to get across at the moment. And there's some explanation under there about each of them, so like background, but we will go.
Jackie, I'm happy to take that on now. Claire won't be able to join us today. So
okay, right. Sorry. Go
I can take that on now. So we can actually use Landcare Victoria as a case study today for some of the things that Jackie and Rebecca are talking about. So we actually use proactive media by launching our plan. We do have a plan that was well thought through with the community and representatives from the community about some of the things that we Landcare community want to see happening in Victoria. One of these issues was an uncertainty around the facilitator roles and coordinators in Victoria. So it's an uncertainty around funding for our Landcare facilitators, our backbone of Landcare in Victoria. They harness the power of 60,000 volunteers and more than 600 groups and networks across Victoria. So we engaged a media specialist and also had the advice of coming up with 3 key messages. So our key messages were to deliver to mainly political leaders so we could see some change and some certainty around this issue. So the messages we deliver to them were, we do have a plan, so we are organized, we know what we're talking about, we identify the issues, and this is the plan. So we launched the plan and we use that plan to let them know that facilitators and coordinators are key to Landcare. So they play a really important role for Landcare. And the solution to that is a long-term and higher funding needed. And we actually gave them a specific figure, $48 million over 4 years towards facilitator and coordinator roles. So we're talking about, we know how much this is worth. So we know what we're talking about. And so they were the 3 key messages. We also, just letting you know that we developed with Sarah, that is here today, developed a very good communication toolkits available in our website, and I'll pop it in the chat box, a link to it. You also have some really great templates and tips in there, such as a letter to your to a minister or to your local MP, and other templates that might be very useful. And we encourage actually you to, if anything, to take this message to your local MPs as well. So this is so this is us, and this is what we did, and how we used the 3 key messages.
Yeah, I'm sure that's going to happen. Charlene's asking, can we get the links on email? I will say, like, I'm not a political expert, but I do work with them, and my understanding is that if you ring and harass your local MP, they're very sensitive to that. They really do take notice of people who call them and people who email them. So when you're asked to like do stuff like that, it actually does make a difference. And I also, all these things that we're talking about, right? Reaching a 12-year-old, being simple with your language, thinking about your audience, that also applies to emails to MPs, right? Like, you can't expect an MP to be across the minute details of your projects, or even understand the difference between Landcare Australia and Landcare Victoria. Like, they should, but we can't expect them to. And the same goes for journalists and the media. You know, they're trying to get across a million things, and they're busy, and we'd like them to be more understanding and know more than they do, but we got to assume with all our stuff that they don't, so we keep it simple for them. So I will send out one of these sheets. This is a sheet that we like to use, and some of this will become clearer. So at the top, you're going to write, why are you doing this interview? And then you're going to write, who are you talking to? You know, you might be talking to the general community in your region. You might be really trying to just reach women aged 30 to 50. You might be trying to reach men aged 60 to 80. I don't know. Like, you think about who you're trying to reach. Your key messages, 1, 2, and 3 across there. And then underneath each key message, you're going to think about how you're going to flesh that out. So if you're talking about your project, you might have some ideas about talking about how you help the turtles, or maybe you've seen twice as many turtles in the last year, and you know, or maybe you've planted twice as many trees, and so if you've got any evidence, it can be anecdotal, it can be, I heard someone told me the other day that this patch that we have planted just makes them feel so much happier every time they drive past, and that like makes my heart sing, and it makes me happy. Like, something like that is still valid. You don't have to be facty. Anecdotes and stories are really powerful tools when we're talking to the media. So, interviews. Now we've got our interview. Now we've written our key messages. We're prepped. What do we do next? Well, I'm glad you asked. Nailing that interview, we're going to talk about things to do and not do, answering nice questions and answering tricky questions. Things to think about. I think someone else put this in the chat just before. Breathe. It calms you down. Keep it brief. Correct errors. So if you're doing an interview, and this will happen if you are talking to ABC local radio, because I used to work with them, they get stuff wrong. Because if you're talking to a regional radio station, you know, ABC Ballarat or something, the host is having to do everything. They are paneling, which means they're pushing all the buttons of their own show. They, like, while they're talking to you, they're getting the music track ready. They're messaging their producer in the other room, who they can see through the glass. They're, you know, they're just all over the place. So they're probably not really listening to you as much as you'd like them to be. They might get your name wrong. They might get something wrong, and you're allowed to correct them. Don't let things that are wrong hang there. if you're talking on TV, speak about what you can see. Oh, you can see behind me, this paddock here was dust 3 years ago, and now look at it with the trees. Beautiful. Anyway, stick to what you know. This is very important, especially for you guys who are local people on the ground. You know your stuff. You're not expected to know national policy, law, whatever. You're allowed to say, well, I'm just a Landcare facilitator. That sounds like a government question to me. I don't think, I'm qualified to answer that. Then really big tip that we always have here is that a good journalist will ask, is there anything else you want to add? And that is your chance to go, well, yes. And then you go through your key messages and make sure you have your nice answer that you didn't quite nail before. That's your chance. And as that Shelby, the journalist there, said, happened to me like 99 times out of 100, I'd ask, oh, is there anything else you want to add? And the person would just nail their answer. And that was the grab that you used. Just best soundbite of the interview, just all the time. Things not to do. And I think, did anybody see, hands up who saw that Brad Banducci, the Woolworths interview? Did anybody see the Woolworths CEO? Amazing. What a boon for us in media training. Don't say something you don't want printed. Yeah, Josh saw it. Don't say, okay, you're on the phone to a journalist, you got to assume they're going to print it. Even if it's I've had farmers complain to me that they've been trying to do a story with a journalist, something about their cattle and whatever. And then they mention, oh yeah, and I'm breeding some like weird chickens over here with special frills or something. And the journalist has gone, oh great. And they've done a story on the chickens and totally forgotten about that other thing. Like journalists can't help themselves. They can't unhear things. They just have this urge to tell people about stuff they hear. So just never do off the records or say something you don't want printed. And, if you sit down to a 2-camera shoot with 4 corners, nothing you say is going to be off the record, right? It's the most obvious thing ever. They're rolling. You can't take anything you say back, okay? Yeah. Yeah, relevant for more than just interview. That's true, Josh. all kinds of conversations. Don't argue, interrupt, or get angry. It's never going to be a good look. If you've ended up on an interview and you thought it was going to be friendly because it's ABC, but it turns out to not be, and they're, having a go at you, oh, well, you're just here to get more funding, or what would you know anyway? It's tempting sometimes to yell back, but you just let them be angry. And if you can stay calm, don't ramble. We're going to try and keep our answers to 30 seconds, folks. 30 seconds is about how much you have to get your point across, not long. Don't lie or bluff. If you don't know, you're allowed to say, actually, I don't know. Like if they ask you, well, how big's your farm? And you don't know, it's okay. Like you can say, actually, that's a great question. I don't know. I'll check and I'll get that information for you. That's a really good question. I'm not sure. I'm going to ask Landcare and I'll get those figures for you. You know what? I can put you in touch with someone at Landcare who can tell you that. That's a good question. I don't know. You're allowed to say, I don't know. You're allowed to just never lie and put something out there that you don't know for sure. And the other thing is, when you look at this picture with Peter Dutton here, what do you see? You see Peter Dutton? Do you see that, like, he is not a monster, and all you can think about when you look at that, right, is Peter Dutton, monster. Peter Dutton is a monster because you don't see the knot, all right? So comms research shows us that people don't process, it's the Trump effect, right? People don't process Trump is an idiot. They only hear Trump. Trump, 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 Trump. They don't hear Trump has said this dumb thing. They just hear Trump said a thing. So the negatives don't carry through. So we try not to repeat negative stuff. If the journalist says to you, what would you know? You're just a greenie. You don't say, no, I'm not a greenie. You say a magic word, actually. Actually, I'm a volunteer. Actually, I'm very connected in my local community. Actually. All right. So nice questions. These are not easy questions, nice questions. Nice questions are things that you're expecting. They're something you should be able to answer if you're not like having a panic moment, and that's okay. We all have them. They're on topic. They're going to let you deliver. I hope this will work. Shout out if it doesn't work. This is an example of a nice question.
Cross-country road trip from Sydney to Adelaide and back again in, get this, an electric car.
Adelaide Stewart and kids Caitlin, Samuel and Eleanor join us from Sydney. Guys, you debunked the myth that you can't do a road trip in an electric car. How much did you save on fuel?
Yeah, so for this particular trip, we saved.
Okay. Easy, well, not easy, sorry. Nice question. How much did you save on fuel? That's something they would have been expecting, right? It's a nice question. It allows them to talk about how great electric vehicles are. Sorry. Stop. We don't want to hear it. We could sit there for 5 minutes of glorious, nice questions. That whole interview was just nice questions, but we'll move on. So the way to answer a nice question, and I've put this all on one slide, so apologies for the mushiness, is a sandwich. SEE, statement, evidence, explanation. There's a first slice of bread is your statement. A sentence to set the scene, a broad answer, broad entry to that answer. Evidence, anecdotes, facts, observations, preferably 3. It sounds more natural. An explanation is where you sum up. And so you decide what meaning you want to bring to that answer. So a question might be something about, and I'll show you later, a question about dung beetles. You can turn that around to anything you want. You can turn any question that you get from a journalist to talk to anything you want. You can inject climate into any answer. You've got to decide the meaning you bring in. So the and so is usually what we use. It's usually a call to action at the end. And so what we'd really like is more funding for Landcare. And so what we really need is more clean energy. And so what we really need is more money to plant more trees, whatever it is. So you state it, you back it up, you sum it up, and then you shut up. We're getting all this done in 30 seconds, remember? Okay. I didn't say it was easy. I said it was nice. So here's an example of a little sandwich from one of our guys in Cairns. He's just an ordinary guy who happens to have solar panels and a battery. Simon Thompson.
The 52-year-old lives with his young family in Cairns, where he says the heat and humidity mean they use a lot of power. For those reasons, in 2017, he decided to overhaul his energy use, making the house more efficient and installing solar panels. He also installed a battery system. Says he's never looked back.
It's a big upfront expense, but it's allowed us to have negative bills. So every time I get a bill, I'm actually looking forward to it. Currently, our bill's set about negative $4 to $16 a month. And what's great is that my bills go down when the power prices go up.
Well, Simon.
Okay, so here's the structure of his answer, more or less. What was the battery expensive? It's a big upfront expense, but it's allowed us to have negative bills. That's his statement. He's evident. So every time I get a bill, I'm looking forward to it. Currently, our bill's negative $4 to $16 a month. There's his evidence. Explanation. And so what's great is my bills go down when the prices go up. So that's just a nice, neat little way of, I probably don't have time to do everyone. There's another one here, Simon Bradshaw. He's been asked, about climate change around the globe. He doesn't actually answer the question that's been asked. He's very neatly just kind of talked about what he wants to talk about. So he said, well, the world's experienced its hottest year on record by far, and we know it's going to get hotter. And then he talks about fire seasons, heat waves, and floods. He doesn't have any examples in his brain that he can instantly bring to mind of around the globe. So he just keeps on to what his key messages are. He goes back to his key messages. Communities are being hit by one disaster after another with very little time to recover. That's the reality of living on a planet made more dangerous by burning fossil fuels. And the lesson this summer is that we have to work much harder to get our emissions down and, of course, keep our communities safe. So Dr. Simon is from the Climate Council, and he uses language like climate crisis and stuff that I wouldn't advise farmers to use, because I want farmers to be reaching audiences like them, other farmers. Other farmers aren't not necessarily going to listen. But in this case, Dr. Bradshaw is a scientist, researcher, and he's talking to the ABC News Radio, I think it was. So he feels qualified to use that kind of language. All right, tricky questions. Tricky questions can be tricky because they sound mean They're unfair. They're going to take the interview somewhere you don't want to go. They're asking you something you don't know the answer to. They're asking you to comment on someone else's criticism. Oh, well, the minister said Landcare isn't worth the money. Ooh, what do you say to that? They're factually incorrect in some way. So how do you answer a tricky question? We use a bridge. And here in Hobart, we have the Tasman Bridge. We build the bridge and we get over it. Here is how we build our bridge. So we start over here on the right. We answer the question just a tiny bit, and we build our bridge, and then we go back to our key message. So bridging allows you to move from a tough question. So you might be asked, well, the Prime Minister said that, Landcare was a waste of time. How do you answer that? You might start with, he may hold that view. Actually, in fact, well, that's one point of view. However, well, the bigger issue here is, the most important thing to remember is, well, that's a common misconception, but our research shows. So these are our little bridging phrases. This is how we're going to get away from saying that horrible thing. We don't want to get into the negatives. This is not the best example, but this is one of our farmers from Farmers for Climate Action, Rob Lee, who went on Country Hour to talk about renewables being good, and then gets asked like, well, people don't like them though, people don't like big solar farms and giant wind farms because they're big, right? They're not very nice to look at. So this is how he answered that.
And renewables, though, that does have some issues, does have some problems that people are concerned about, legitimate issues. Yes, well, we're just south of Wellington in the Central West renewable energy zone, and friends of mine who own land up that way are concerned about the sight of thousands of acres of solar panels, and that change, that concern about change is very understandable, and I think that the government has to be very careful to not let development be rampant and walk over people's concerns. I think the whole community has to see the benefits of these developments, not just the landowners who sell their land or lease their land.
So Rob there doesn't shy away from that. He says, well, yeah, it's a thing. People are worried, but then he eventually gets around to saying, well, there are benefits though. He says the concern is very understandable, as a way to sort of start bridging over. You will see politicians are really bad at this, right? They're terrible at bridging. They'll just start answering the question. They'll just ignore it. They'll just start answering with whatever they want to say and not acknowledge the question. It's really important to give some small answer to acknowledge that this thing's been said, because otherwise you sound just like a total phony, right? Like, well, yeah, I've heard that. I've heard people in my community say that they're worried. However, what we need to think about is that, this change has to happen and blah, blah, or whatever it is you're going to say. So you can't control whether the story is published, when and where it's published, or what the story looks like. We take a leap of faith when we talk to media. I have been a journalist, and Beck talked about ABC people. I got out the camera, I went to people's houses and I filmed stories with them. I wrote the story. I spent 2 or 3 days of my life on something for it to be in the rundown, and then I'm watching it and they just took it out of the rundown and it never went to air. I've had that happen to me. It happens to reporters that they might have. Did you ever have that happen to you, Beck? You've written a story and you think, oh, this isn't too bad, and then it just gets spiked. You can't always control, something might happen in the news agenda that just takes over. A massive Telstra outage just takes over the news agenda. You can't control that, right? What you can control is what you say and how you say it. We can be good talent. We can have really fun anecdotes. We can be colourful in what we're saying and visual in our descriptions and make punchy points and not ramble, and make them want to talk to us again when the issue comes back around again, even if that story doesn't make it. So to sum up, we've ended up a bit early here, so we've got to have time for questions and discussions. in communicating with media and, you know, with an MP, with anyone really, why are you doing this bit of communication? Why do you want to talk to the media? We have a lot of it's a very noisy space. Journalists' inboxes are just absolutely rammed. Thousands of emails a day from people. You got to think about why you're going to bother them. And who you're going to talk to, who's the audience. The media need a strong angle, right? Taylor Swift was news because she's prominent. She's really well known. She's one of the most famous people on the planet right now. She was proximate. It was close to Melbourne. That's why it was on the front of the Herald Sun, because it was in Melbourne. If it had been a concert in Dallas, no. If it had been, you know, I don't know, Midnight Oil doing a concert, it might have been in the paper, it wouldn't have been on page one. You've got to think about these news angles. Is it something current? Taylor Swift is super current. Everyone's talking about it right now. Climate change is current. People are still talking about it. Is it something fresh that media haven't heard about before? Is it something local to your area? Is it something you can fit into a cost of living angle because you've fundraised to put solar panels on your local hall? It's saving that hall association's energy bills. Is it something you can, you know, think about what you're giving the journalists? Everybody's like, oh, media should be reporting my stuff. Well, no, why should they? You got to make them want to do it, right? Key messages, 3 ideas once you get the interview, 3 ideas you want people to take away from an interview, and then nail it with a nice structure. Look, you're not going to nail every interview, every answer to every question with that perfect structure. Like it's, you know, it's a very high bar, high goal, but it's nice to have, right? It's nice to have an idea about how you can, especially with it having that anecdote in the middle. So start like, oh, that's a really great question, and I've thought about this a lot. And what people are telling me is blah, blah, blah. And really sum up. If you can do nothing else, get your and so in. And so what we really need is the government to go harder on climate change and cut out coal and gas. Or what we really need is the government to give more investment in programs that are actually making a difference on the ground, like Landcare facilitators. Okay. Now, I just had one more little thing here. I wanted to show you if we had time. So these were remember the Landcare messages. This is an example of if I was pretending to be a Landcare facilitator and I was being asked about a dung beetle project, how I would pivot in the middle of that answer to talking about what I wanted to talk about, which is get Landcare more money, please, God. Okay, so we start out. Would you like to see more Landcare dung beetle projects? I've made this up. I don't know if this is a thing, all right? This is just fantasy land. Right across Victoria. And I start out with my statement. Look, more dung beetle projects would definitely be a start for farmers across Victoria, but there are plenty more great projects that Landcare Victoria does. The organisation actually has a plan to grow programs that care for animals and plants and address climate change, but what they need is more facilitators to run them, more people like me, I guess. And so what we want to see is more ongoing funding for Landcare. I think they need about $48 million over 4 years. You might not put that in. And so that would help us get more dung beetles and other incredible work rolling out across the state. So that is an example of how I would put I've put them all in there, those 3 messages into an answer sandwich for you. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, back to Anna.
Thanks, Jackie. And I actually, we do have Jane Carney here tonight. Jane, thanks for showing up because I know it was a busy day for you. But she can actually just explain a little bit more on how we took that message to the media and what successes we had with it. Maybe some lessons, Jane, or, you know, how were your interviews? How was after launching the plan? Did you have any, you know, any of those interviews coming up, and how did you dealt with them? You know, anything, any lessons there that you've learned that you want to share?
Thanks, Anna. And thanks, Jackie. It's a great presentation. I'm sorry I'm only catching the end of it. Look, to be honest, getting interest from the media isn't that hard. If you've got a local community newspaper or local radio, they actually want local news stories that will be of interest to their local readers or listeners. And I don't think I ever go into an interview feeling really confident that I'm going to get my message across. So I think it's so important to have those simple rules. Stick to your 3 key messages. Keep coming back to them if you get a bit confused. Just keep it really simple. On the whole, most of the reporters are very understanding. They'll know, or you can tell them straight up, I'm not familiar with doing radio or TV or whatever it is. They'll try to take care of you. They don't want you to feel terribly uncomfortable. As Jackie said, if you turn out to be a natural, really punchy or really interesting, they'll actually call you again for comment about other issues that they think might impact on the theme of what they spoke to you about. All I can say is just be really, really clear about what you want and make sure that you use the opportunity to ask for it, whether it's going in to see your local minister or your local MP, or the opposition. Just be really clear about what you want. They're expecting you to ask for something. Now, you might not come out with the $48 million if you're not comfortable with that. You come out with what your facilitator means to you in your community and that you want ongoing funding to ensure that facilitator stays in your community, and preferably that you might actually get another facilitator, because there's so much great work being done and all the volunteers appreciate the role that the facilitators play. So just stick with what you know, what you're comfortable with, and just keep repeating the same message. I think that's about all I can suggest. But don't be afraid of reaching out to, whether it's, your local news station, ABC or newspaper, even social media. They'll pick up stories. But yeah, on the whole, I've found generally they want to hear from you. So don't be afraid to reach out.
Thanks, Jane. Oh, go on, Jackie.
Yeah, next week, actually I'll bring it up to next week actually, is I'll be looking a lot more at, okay, you want to contact your local paper? How do you do that? So we'll go a lot more into, all right, you've got your confidence up a little, you've taken a breath and gone, yeah, I'm gonna hassle some local media and see if we can get some stuff happening. How you go about doing that and what's the best way? Long answer short, pick up the phone, but we're gonna walk you through that a bit more. So that's my plug to come next week, because we're going to go in a lot more detail of, all right, how do you bother journalists? How do you become friends with a journalist? How do you put your best foot forward? Another thing I meant to say, we just kind of whizzed through our, doing your interviews, is for any ladies on the call, any people who identify as female, I would like to say, do not worry about if you are not feeling confident or if you think that, it'd be better if someone else did. No, if you're the leader or facilitator of your group, you are the person telling the story, okay? And the number of times as a reporter I have gone with my camera and whatever, and I've had lead scientists, female lead scientists, leading projects, leading divisions going, oh, look, I don't really feel very good about being on camera. I haven't done my makeup. I'm like, what? You're in charge, woman. People get worried about how they're going to come across. If you've ever done, some of you've done radio interviews, I think you said in the form, if you listen back to how you sound, obviously your voice sounds different recorded and outside of your head. It's horrible. Like I've had that as a reporter, I had to, read the news and record it, and people wrote in and said how much they hated it. That happens, but it won't happen to you because you think that you sound horrible or you look horrible or you see yourself in the TV and think, oh God, or in the paper. People don't see that, right? They just see a Landcare person smiling. They don't see like, oh, Jane Scott, what's she wearing that hat for? They don't think that. Okay. So you got to try and pull your big Landcare boots on, and I mean, it's I'm sure a lot of you are totally fine with this, but like I just wanted to say that because I know for some of us it's like a challenge, right, to be in the media, and it seems a bit scary. And guys too, if you're the facilitator, you're the person that has carriage of that story. Don't step aside. Don't hide. Have I been bossy enough yet?
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah,
we got any
heaps of time. Yeah. So just a reminder that this session is being recorded. We will send the recording to everyone that has been registered to participate today, all of you and the ones that can come, and it will be available in our website and I believe in the Climate Media Centre's website. We will send the links. We will send the presentation. So everything that was provided here today will be sent by email. So we do, I don't know what you think, but I thought it was a great presentation from Jackie and Rebecca. I've learned a lot today, and I'll definitely remember the hands, Rebecca, when I don't know what to do with them. Yeah, and definitely some really good tips there. So we do have time for questions, isn't it, Jackie? So I'm actually happy to take questions from anyone that wants to talk. You can unmute yourselves or put your hands up.
I got a question. It came direct to me. Is it ever worth sending in an article for a journalist to edit or use rather than a press release? Is it less work? Yes and no. Rather than a press release, I have to be honest, as a journalist, you didn't really read a press release. I spend a lot of time with a lot of groups editing press releases, and people get very het up about what word goes where in a press release, and and how it's going. And I said, like, they're not really going to read it. Like, if you put a really sexy headline on it, they might use it. Really lazy journalists or journalists who are really time poor might take whole chunks of it and use it. But you can, instead of writing a whole press release, you could contact a journalist directly and like with bullet points is probably the best. Like bullet point what you want them to know. You could put in like, and they might write back and go, oh, can I quote you on that? And you say, yeah, any of that is fine to appear in the paper under my name. Like a press release, a well-written press release would kind of lend itself to being almost an article anyway, I suppose. But I would, rather than sending them a whole article, I'd send them bullet points, I reckon. Would probably be my advice. Any other questions?
Can I just jump in there, Jack?
Yeah.
Also, as well, if you've got something that's quite fully formed, it doesn't have to be a press release. It could be a letter to the editor. You could pitch it as an op-ed, an opinion piece. And then you could just like, I guess, control your writing a little bit more as well, rather than getting the journalist to edit it and have the final touches on what you've put together.
Yeah, there's all kinds of tactics we deploy in our media, and we can talk a bit about them next week. But contacting journalists directly is still the best way. My way is I ring up the main line and go, oh, I just know who's, even though I know, but I just pretend. Who would be the best person to pitch a story about blah? And they'll be like, oh, what's the story? And they'll be like, well, the story is, and then I do my little spiel, very, very short, like a sentence or two. Oh, it's about this. And they'll go, oh, yeah, send it over via email to so-and-so. And by that point, I've already engaged them in talking about what the story is. And I've got someone on the phone who's listened to me explain this story, which is better than just emailing it. There's no guarantee they're going to read an email. There's no guarantee even they read the email that they'll act on it. But if you've managed to call someone, and especially if you're not in the media circus, if you're from Wangaratta Landcare, call them up. Be like, oh, hey, is this, I'm trying to get a journalist at you know, oh gosh, what's the paper in Wangaratta? Do you know? Someone shout. Yeah, you know, and the Chronicle, yes.
The Chronicle, yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm trying to get someone at the Chronicle. I've got a local story here they might be interested in. Who's the best person to talk to about that? Is a tactic that I frequently deploy. And I've probably looked up, we have a database called Media that we can look up. I've looked already up who it is, probably, and I've probably already got the email. I'm like, oh, what's your email? And I'll, you know, write it down. But you're talking to them and you're starting to establish a relationship. And you're not annoying them too much. If you're asking them for advice, oh, who's best for this? You're not asking them to commit to anything. You're not saying, oh, you should do my story. My story is about this. Or would you like to do a story on this? You're not asking them to commit. You're just saying, oh, who's the best person for a story about this? And in that way, you've kind of not asking them to do anything for you, that, you know, you're asking their advice, which is somehow, for me, a bit less confronting. I wish I could stick around on the 26th of March for the fire and gorse presentation, by the way. There's a lot of gorse in Tassie, just saying. It's not good.
Yeah, that is gorse everywhere, unfortunately. Yeah, so anyway, so if we have to finish early, we will finish early, because I know that everyone just wants to go and either eat dinner or make dinner like myself. But we still have time for questions. So if you want to take this opportunity, please do. We do have a follow-up webinar next week, as Jackie mentioned, and those are the other webinars we have planned for the rest of the financial year. Some really good ones coming up as well. Just also letting you know that once we log off the meeting, there will be a survey there that I really would appreciate if you fill it in. It is really important for us to measure the outcomes of events like this, so we can prove to our funders that we're doing a all right job. They can give us more money, and also to understand if we are doing the right things, if we're doing this at the right time of the day, etc. So your feedback is really important to us. It won't take much time at all. So if no one else has any other questions, I'll give you another minute to put your hands up or unmute yourselves. Thanks for the feedback in the chat there from earlier. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing most of you next week. Hopefully you can make it. Otherwise it will be recorded as well. I'll also recommend that you watch it's only a 30-minute presentation on our in the link that is there in the chat about our advocacy message webinar that we had. It is actually really worth watching as well. It's an add-on to this. Yeah, so I think we'll probably say goodbye, and I'll see you next week, hopefully. Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, Rebecca, so much for your support delivering this webinar. Thanks, Jane. Jane's our chair. Thanks for coming tonight. I know it was a rush. And thanks for Sarah for also coming here and supporting the webinar, and especially to all of you for showing up.